Hello, everybody. Welcome to CyberKriya, the home of cybersecurity wisdom, one podcast at a time. Today's guest is a special one. I would say it's more a special one for me as a learner. I think I'm looking to learn a lot today, a topic which I would say is probably I want to know and learn more about it. Maybe I'm not using as I should be, and we all should be using as we should be. So I'll be be more like a as a student and trying to learn from the guru or the expert we have today. Our guest name is Christian Lechner. He owns the whole platform automation for BTP, but I will let him speak more about it, and I will give him a moment for that. Please join me to welcome Christian Lechner to the show.
Yeah, hello everybody. Also, hello from my side, and thanks a lot for having me. As you already said, so I'm Christian. I'm product manager on platform automation, so specifically focusing on the topics of business technology platform, so namely BTP CLI and Terraform. So those are the two topics that I own, especially for the platform automation to make the life of administrators, platform teams, however you want to call it, easier, more comfortable on their end.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen, for coming on the show. And I love the way you said we want to make life easier for our platform administrator. But before we kind of deep dive into our topic or all these different tools you mentioned, if I haven't heard about this BTP CLI or Terraform, maybe just want to maybe mention what it is and very in a generic and a layman term, if you can.
Yeah, sure. So we are talking about the business technology platform, which is from an SAP perspective, the foundation of all the solutions that we have, the solutions that we own, the solutions that the partners are building. And of course, also for our customers to go down this storyline of clean core, of extending their applications, which they do a lot in order to kind of tailor the way that the business processes run. Now, if you want to do that, there is one step that you have to do on the business technology platform, and that's basically the setup, building the foundation to be able to build your applications. So for example, if you have an application, you would need a database, you would need something like a subaccount on BTP, you would need entitlements and whatnot. Now, in order to provision that, you of course have the option to go to the cockpit of the business technology platform of SAP BTP and click around. Now, over the time, there have been two tools that have been added in order to make this more easier and more reproducible for our customers. And that's the BTP CLI, so a command line interface that you use in order to create, update, delete, or fetch information from the platform. That's one thing. I think those who are listening to this podcast, maybe they are on the AWS, on the Azure, on the Google cloud platform side, or are working there also. So they also have their own CLIs in order to interact with the platform. So that's kind of one part of the story. Second part is then really, I would say, state-of-the-art automation of the provisioning and the management of resources on BTP. So when you think about a team that wants to build an application on BTP, usually the company or the administrators of the company have to provision some stuff in order to get them going. Let's say they need a subaccount, they need the entitlements for all the services that they want to use within their application, like a database, as I said, like, I don't know, audit log service whatsoever. And they need a runtime like Cloud Foundry or Kima. Now, with the BTP CLI, you can, of course, provision that stuff, but then it gets really hard to kind of keep track of the stuff that you provisioned. So maybe there are some users in the cockpit changing some configurations, and it's really hard to kind of then figure out what they did from an administrator's perspective, and also from a security perspective and from a governance perspective. You kind of wrapped your head around how to set things up first. Then you set them up, and then you want them to stay that way, or you want to make changes for all the subaccounts that you provisioned. And this is, I think, where Terraform has its strength. So Terraform, for those who are completely new to this topic, is a tool that is, let's say, an instantiation or using the paradigms of infrastructure as code. And the idea behind that paradigm is to define your infrastructure as code, as you would do it for application code. So you do not say like in the CLI or in when calling APIs, I want to do X, Z, and Y, and I tell you exactly how to do that in order to come to the final state of my subaccount with entitlements. With infrastructure as code, you define stuff not imperatively, but declaratively. So you say, I want a subaccount, I want the attributes to look like this. And then the infrastructure as code tool has to figure out how to come to that state. That's a completely different ballgame, so to say. And Terraform is, I would say, the industry standard for infrastructure as code. So there are also other tools like Pulumi, like Crossplane or alike, or even tools that are platform specific. So for those who are on Azure, they might know Bicep, which is also infrastructure as code, but only working for Azure. And Terraform is kind of agnostic. And that's why we decided to use Terraform for infrastructure as code to really give our admins or platform teams the option to define their infrastructure as code, provision the infrastructure with the toolset that is there for Terraform, and then also manage the infrastructure. So you kind of cover the whole life cycle from the start to changes to the deprovisioning. Because maybe an app will not maybe, sure, an app won't run forever. So at some point in time, you would like to deprovision the stuff, and Terraform can do that.
Okay. So I had two different tools. BTP CLI is more like a command line interface. You kind of open your black screen. You have to, I believe there's some steps to install CLI on your machine first.
Yeah.
And we can share those details as well. So you go to that, whatever SAP/BTP/CLI, whatever URL is, then you download those CLI, install on your machine. Then you can connect from CLI to your global account in BTP or
Exactly.
sub account, right? And
That's
then
correct.
the Terraform is like more like industry standard, which probably is more common term infrastructure as code, which is probably is being used widely outside of SAP, which we're trying to embrace in our world as well.
Yeah.
Is it correct?
That's correct. So for BTP CLI, you can either download it from the Cloud Tools page that we have, or depending on your operating system, if you are on macOS, you can use Brew. If you are on Windows, you can use Winget. And I think for Linux, there is an install script, so shell script that you can call, and that will download the stuff and install it on your path. So it's quite comfortable, but as you said, it's not covering the whole story. So you can do a lot locally, and that makes perfect sense for, let's say, digging into things, analyzing things, looking how stuff looks like on the platform. If you're not sure if there are some problems that you want to troubleshoot, I think that the CLI is the perfect tool. Of course, you can also write bash scripts or PowerShell scripts using the CLI then to automate stuff. Depends on what you want to achieve. So typical scenario is what every admin on BTP can rely to is cleaning up users. So you have within your global account a lot of users due to consulting companies that came in, went out, and at some point in time you would like to throw out all the users that are there. That are no longer active. And this is a scenario that is often done by using the CLI. Now with Terraform, as you said, that's more the industry standard. That's more what all the other cloud providers have in place. It's not super old, I would say. So I'm not sure. I think it was invented or founded in 2013 or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. But it's super matured since then. And it's used everywhere. Every hyperscaler has this in their toolbox. And now since 2024, also SAP has that in their toolbox in order to help admins to get their stuff done.
Yeah, because I think if you're an AWS guy or Azure guy or GCP, you probably have used Terraform in one form or another. I think this is for the SAP audience, which is like seems as something new because again, BTP, the whole kind of a cloud foundry, the whole Kubernetes schema and everything seems like new for us. And I'm a security guy, so I think when this BTP thing came, is like seemed like so powerful. But as you rightly said, there are so much thing which probably you would be doing manually today in the cockpit, which probably it would be better to do it in a better, more controlled way, either using CLI or if you're more mature. So maybe so I'm hearing like CLI is more like that's where you start. So suppose I'm a customer or maybe or I just say a whatever kind of a practitioner today, and I haven't used CLI or Terraform. So if I have to start, so do you recommend I start from first testing with CLI first and then go on Terraform journey, or how you have seen, or what's your recommendation on that one, Christian?
That's a tough question. So I think there is no either or from my perspective. So I think to first wrap your head around BTP, I think you have to go to the cockpit even, because usually people are more visual. What they want to see is how does the structure look like? How do things change? And I do that too. So if there is a new service and there is something to figure out how that works, I also go to the cockpit first, click around, see, okay, that looks like that. And then I try to transfer that to Terraform or BTP CLI. Now, if you start your journey, I think the lower entry barrier is given by the BTP CLI. So if, as you said, if you start, I think you have an easier start with the BTP CLI because you locally install it. You do a BTP login --SSO, you're logged in and you can go ahead. With Terraform, there is a bit of a higher entry barrier because you have to understand the domain-specific language that Terraform brings along. So that's this HashiCorp configuration language. HashiCorp invented Terraform, that's why it's called that way, HCL. I think it's very readable, very human-friendly from my perspective. But of course, you have to understand how things are working. You have to understand some concepts around Terraform. They are not hard to understand, but you have to learn them, and then you're good to go. So I would assume that you first start with BTP CLI and then with Terraform if you are coming from the SAP world. Because what I have seen is a lot of administrators are coming from the, let's say, classical SAP NetWeaver administration. And then that's quite a step ahead with BTP and learning CLI, learning Terraform. That's a lot. For folks who are coming in from the non-SAP world, like from Azure, AWS, they're usually immediately jumping on Terraform because that's what they're used to in the other platforms.
So me personally, I would say I think that's true because I come from SAP background, even though I have kind of worked on the cloud and other pieces too, but I'm not a infra guy and I haven't used like a Terraform as a infrastructure as code. So CLI was pretty easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've seen Terraform working for at least for some migration, but I would say I haven't got like the whole file structure and things like that. So maybe I should spend more time there. And maybe I would love to deep dive too. But I have one question before I think I go there. So when I go to BTP, I know you also mentioned like it's good to first spend time on cockpit first so that you understand the whole kind of a chronology of how the BTP is and what our different services are. And then you can think about automating because you're automating actually the things you can do on the cockpit. So when I go to like, there's something called boosters on the BTP. So is the boosters are similar to Terraform? Is it like in the backend, there's a Terraform going on or is it just something else?
Boosters don't have Terraform in the backend, so to say. So that's kind of a pity, to be honest with you. So they are directly calling the APIs underneath. Now, boosters are kind of, well, for me, they give me mixed feelings. Let's say it that way. So if you are starting with setting up something really complex, so you have a lot of services and roles and role collections and whatnot to provision, then boosters can help you with setting that up. But there is a big but on that. You only see the result. You don't see what happened in this black box of the booster. You then have an account that has, I don't know, AI core set up or Joule set up, for example. But you have really then to figure out that's entitlement, that's new, that's service instance. Okay, that makes sense. Now roles, role collections, and all that stuff and how that fits together. That's not a part of the boosters. So I'm honestly saying not a big fan of boosters because of this black box character. So I think my personal opinion, it makes more sense if we would have a decent description within help.sap.com how to set things up. So really like a checklist, do this, do this, do this, then do that. Because this is something that you can easily transfer to Terraform then. But that's not the case. So kind of we have those boosters and they are given. But I also heard from a lot of customers who want to go to Terraform saying this booster stuff, we have this black box. We don't know what happens. We would like to know what happens. So we use it probably for a sandbox system, for people to experiment with new services.
Yeah.
But we will not use it in any productive environment, which
No, I
I
think
completely understand.
when I was saying it, I was kind of relating back to it, and you're truly right. It's just like a black box. You can't control your naming, even if it's creating service keys or things like that. You can't. I wish there was kind of a you're giving some options at least for things it's going to create, like a naming or whatever, right? It just create things and based on whatever configuration logic somebody has built, right? So
Exactly.
okay. So if
Perfect example, naming conventions.
yeah,
Every company that we talk to has naming conventions.
yeah.
And they would like to have it. So if they use
Yeah.
the booster, they can create it and maybe rename it afterwards, but that's kind of not the way it should be.
No, there's things which you can't rename. So I think even one thing which kind of I would say I figured out the whole BTP sub-account subdomain, right? We call it subdomain, right?
It's
That
subdomain,
cannot
yeah.
be changed. It's
Nope.
once it's
Subdomain is
created,
fixed.
it sits with your URL and it's
Yeah.
like one way. And I wish probably there was some option, but I understand why, because it kind of gets into your path of the whatever endpoint you create, right?
Exactly.
But there are things you can't change it. So I get your points. If you are those customers who have like a strong naming convention, have a strong governance, you want to control, you want to see how you want to create things. So within like a framework, Terraform is what I'm hearing. Terraform is the way to go versus
It's
just
the way to
using
go, yeah.
Booster, which probably would make your life easy for some time, but it's not good for your overall governance and
It's
things.
it's kind of this shortcut that you have at the
Yeah.
beginning, but then you pay
Yeah.
the price for that. And as you said, I mean, naming conventions, that sounds quite trivial or quite, I don't know, do you really need that? Why?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that then at some point boils down to also FinOps. So you have naming conventions, you then also probably have labels on your sub account or wherever you can put them in order to do decent financial operations, in order to do cross-charging and whatnot. How would you do that if you cannot influence that when you create that stuff? And that's kind of, it's not that, well, naming, who cares?
No. I think, and that's where I
Definitely
think
not.
again, security guys and the governance guys, I think they think like that, but you don't see the same kind of mindset when they're just trying to spin up a new service. That's it, right? They don't see that whole kind of a long term impact of, you said FinOps and maybe some other kind of a things, right? And maybe I don't know, just I don't know, uh, maybe you want to automate who should have access. So you have like proper governance in your BTP accounts, sub accounts, directory, and things like that. If you just start doing everything into one, it's gonna create like the whole sprawl and a nightmare for governance, right? It's just like if you're small, it's good. If you have one sub account, one service is good.
If,
But think about hundreds
and that's kind of, I would say, a problem or the root of everything, because you start with one sub account. You probably start with one, maybe 2 or 3. So you have dev test prod or something like that. And then you start with that and you want to get things started. The development team is knocking at your door and saying, hey, we want to implement that. Our business users are requiring this app. And then you start kind of this, I mean, quote unquote, sturdy way. And at some point in time, you don't have only 1, 2, 3 sub accounts. You suddenly have 70, 100 sub accounts. And then the fun starts. Because then you have to do the cleanup and whatnot. So
it's
that's
always
hard. Yeah.
when you're building a house, that foundation has to be strong enough, right?
Yeah.
It's not like we will do that thing when we kind of get to that 15 or 20 or 30 sub accounts. It's built when you have the very first sub account, right?
When you start, you should have an idea. Yeah. I mean, we also have to be honest, things will evolve. So you will learn things along the way that you didn't know from the beginning. And as you said, there are some things that are hard to change, like a subdomain for a sub account, but there are other things that you can change along the way. Again, here I think Terraform as infrastructure as code is the perfect tool, because you have it as code and you should take that kind of literally. Because this code is checked into a Git repository, GitHub, GitLab, whatnot. And if you do changes now along the way because you learn something, you let's say, super trivial example, you want to add an additional label. Then you can do that for all your sub-accounts, and you want to change the code. And then what you do is the same thing that application developers would do. You create a pull request, and within the pull request, you have the changes, you have a description why you changed that, somebody is reviewing that, and then this gets merged and applied to the sub-accounts. So this way, you can change things, and you still have perfect governance. You even have an audit trail due to the fact that this pull requests get reviewed, and you get a sign-off. You can then even define that 4, 8, how many eyes whatsoever principles you want to apply. And that's, I think, super beneficial.
Okay, so I think I have some question maybe
Yep.
from the other side. I'm trying to wear my other hat now and maybe trying to be devil's advocate as well. I think I've seen like non-SAP word, like there is a admin or developer, like they kind of do like same person is playing multiple kind of or wearing multiple hats. They are the one who actually developing, and you said that I heard GitHub, then I say pull, and I say things like that. In SAP, I don't know if you try to compare with the SAP word, right? You have a basis guy, and you have a developer who's trying to be the BTP developer now. The basis guy is trying to be the BTP admin now.
Mhm.
Security guy is like me trying to be the BTP admin slash security admin, trying to make sure the governance are rightly built. And also I give only access I should be giving to my admins. How do I respect my SOD boundaries, my compliance boundary and things like that? This Terraform, I think this whole automation sounds music to me. But the question I have is, so right now I can limit what my admin can do in BTP cockpit. I can
Mhm.
give them global account admins are limited, sub account admins are limited, directory and things like that, and kind of limit. Okay, you are developer, you only get access to your build or whatever access. You don't
Mhm.
get to access to
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So I try to limit cockpit access, be able to create service keys. I will try to come on the service keys also later. But for this Terraform, this whole infrastructure as code, Kristen. So who if I'm an admin, you're still using my access is more like a service key, like how this whole thing is working. So you have a
Mhm.
file somewhere, you have this SCL file, whatever configuration file.
HCL,
You
yeah, yeah.
have to do things like okay, create sub account directory and entitlement and service keys and things like that. Run that command somehow using some ID. So what is actually happening? I want to know more about it. There's like,
Mhm.
and how
Mhm.
do I limit and how do I still ensure my security, my RBAC, my least privileges, and still my authorized user. It's not like somebody just somehow running it and then it's changing things, which is not even approved. So I want to know more about that if you can share, Kristen.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So that depends. So that's not a in the first step, that's not a question for Terraform, but that's more an organizational question. So how do you structure your responsibilities within your company? So as you said in the cockpit, and that's a very good approach from my perspective, you kind of limit especially the access of the developers. A developer shouldn't necessarily have full access as a sub-account admin because first of all, it's not their job to do that, to know all the nitty-gritty details, but it's also kind of a security measure. Now, what you should first define is who is responsible for what. So we have seen customers who kind of say the admin team is responsible for, let's say, Cloud Foundry until the point that a Cloud Foundry environment gets created. And from that point on, so spaces downwards, so to say, that's part of the development team. We have also seen other customers who really say everything is handled by the platform team or for the admin team, including space creation, service instance creation, service key creation, etc. And the development team is really just responsible for their app, for the deployment of their app, and for wiring things up. And of course, they have access to, depending if they use it, build code or whatsoever. Now, when you use Terraform, you first have to define that because then you have to say, okay, this setup that my admin team owns, that's something that I want to put into Terraform from the admin perspective.
Okay, so I have my RACI defined. I already know these are my platform admins, which probably would go to cockpit and perform these anyway. So those
Exactly.
are my authorized
Exactly.
users who are doing that, whatever process I'm trying to automate, build infrastructure, account directory and everything. So they are the authorized
Yep. Exactly.
admins, platform
So,
admins. And now we go to automation, right?
and now we go to automation. And
Okay.
now I think it's a good practice to have then a technical user who has the right authorization and not using a personalized user for that.
Yeah.
So that I think is common, because if we're
Is
talking
it like a
about,
technical user in the cockpit? Like we will create a technical user itself just for this?
you would create
Okay.
a technical user for that, or
Okay.
maybe even multiple technical users who have very restricted roles, as far as that's possible on BTP.
Okay.
And you would then assign them. So I'm quite a GitHub guy, so I know a lot about GitHub, how to automate there. So what you would probably do is the username password, which is not so nice, user X509 certificate, and then store that in the secrets of GitHub. And then when you do this Terraform activity, this processing of your Terraform script and applying it to the platform, this is done by a GitHub action or any pipeline that you use. And within this GitHub action, this technical user authenticates against BTP, has the corresponding role collections that you assigned to the user, and then it can do the stuff it can do. As you said, it's the same as in the cockpit. The admin has, for example, subaccount administrative rights. Then this user has subaccount administrative rights, and this user can then do whatever an admin would be able to do in the cockpit. Now, there is one difference. When you do it in the cockpit alone, you can do stuff, and maybe then you have a different topic to work on, and then you maybe forgot what you did. And you maybe also did not fully note down why this was necessary. Maybe there is a ticket, maybe it's not a ticket because somebody from the development team came into your office and said, hey, we need to change that setting because otherwise we cannot continue to work. This is kind of not the case if you work with Terraform, or at least it shouldn't be the case if you work with Terraform, because then you have, give me an issue. Based on the issue, I will change the Terraform code, the infrastructure as code. We will do a pull request. It will be reviewed, so some second person will look on it. I mean, this is where then also you can bring in AI and do some review via AI. I mean, Terraform, there is that much code out there, it can really help you there. Or for you as a security guy, you can also bring in policy frameworks. So you
What's
can, of
that?
course, then define policies that check your changes of the Terraform code if they are still compliant. That's also something that you cannot do in the cockpit.
So within Terraform itself, like there's a
It's
policy framework?
no, it's so that's kind of the beauty of Terraform. So Terraform has a huge ecosystem surrounding Terraform. And there is a tool that's called Open Policy Agent, OPA, which is a CNCF project. So Cloud Native Computing Foundation, it has the highest maturity level in CNCF. And this is something where you can define rules. So for example, what you probably don't want to do is delete a subaccount without having somebody confirm that via review. Or also maybe you don't want to delete service instances automatically. And this is something where you can define rules based on what Terraform plans to do. So maybe one step back. So with Terraform, you can find out what a code change would do on the platform. So you get a so-called Terraform plan, which tells you, I will create that, I will update that, I will delete that. You can take that information, throw that into your policy as code tool, and then define rules like, okay, subaccount deletions are not allowed, service instance deletions may be also not so clever. And this is then something that you can validate. So you can have a lot of security guardrails. Not only that you do, let's say, stuff that you shouldn't do, but also to make sure that, for example, some security settings are not compromised due to some change. Maybe that some role assignments are currently removed or added to folks that shouldn't have it. And this is something that you can put into such tools. And this is, from my perspective, a huge advantage when you do that via Terraform.
I'm glad you brought that delete subaccount things. The very first exposure with BTP to me was, it's powerful, but it's so easy to mess up. Just three dots, click it, delete subaccount. And actually submitted a feature request for SAP. I'm like, because I come from like, I know, seen AWS and other, like you have some kind of boundary. You create SCP boundary and you explicitly deny a few actions. Like even though you are admin, you cannot do that as a kind of a global admin, or I think we call control tower in AWS world, right? Like kind of limit what you can do, right? Kind of get a policy or a kind of a boundary framework, right? So, and I was like, no, like I wanna, even the roles, I would say, I think maybe my wish list is like I wanna see more granular roles, like I can limit, maybe remove the delete action from my sub account admin, which is not possible today, right? I want to give them everything, but not a delete. Or maybe when you click delete, there's a separate kind of a workflow. There is MFA. So I submitted that feature request. Unfortunately, it was closed and giving me like, you have to use SSO and thing, which I still kind of don't agree as a security guy. But I think loved when you say you can have that thing in if you use Terraform, you can have a policy framework that's called policy framework. I think you said policy framework, right?
Open policy framework. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
open policy framework. That's the project name. It's
Okay.
completely open source. It's super mature, super stable. It's used in a lot of places. The language, how you define policies, that's kind of something you have to get used to. But once you're used to it, it works. Now, I fully agree with you with respect to the roles. So especially if you're coming from AWS, you have this IAM concept where you can do very granular tweaking of your roles and your setup. This is something that is unfortunately not the case on BTP. So you're not the first one who is mentioning that. So we have heard that a lot because, as you said, it's not so difficult to mess things up. And especially you quite quickly get auto-assigned roles or role collections that allow you to mess things up. So yeah, it would definitely be beneficial to have that in a more fine granular way. I mean, from that perspective, with automation, with Open Policy Agent, you can now say that's duct taping around something that is not there, which should be there. But at least there is a solution for folks to mitigate that and not to do, let's say, dumb stuff on BTP, because especially deleting subaccounts is something that I also do not hear the first time.
It doesn't stop you, right? Like unless there is some service which is using that some service somehow. I've only seen like it's stopping you because of one of the service which was using the CIS, which was part of the sub account. If it's like all clean, there's no dependency, just say information message, warning message, it's going to delete, and yes, delete it, and it's all gone, right?
So so we have this two-step concept, which is deletion if there is nothing in the sub account. If there is something in the sub account, you have to accept that things get force deleted. That's how it's called. Okay. Now, in the not too far future, there will be also a new feature that even if you do force deletion in a pending state for a few days, so that you can revive it. Again, if you ask me, yes, that's a solution to the problem. That's a possible solution. I don't know if the approach that you also mentioned wouldn't be the better one. To have more fine granular roles, even if there is a global account admin, don't let him delete stuff. If this is a sub-account admin, don't let him delete the sub-account. Full stop. That's it. Yeah, but that's
or
what
as at
it
least
is.
an organization, let me define my kind of things which I don't want to allow. Even your sub account admin or whatever, you can only create things, change things, authorized changes, not like anything, right? Just because you have access, right?
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. So I think on the Terraform, again, going back to on that one. So if I am a customer, is it easy if I'm like going as a new BTP kind of a customer? Is it easy to go this route? Or if I'm already on that whole BTP, there is a cockpit and all admin is doing is going to cockpit and doing things, maybe using Booster. So how do kind of bring in this automation, kind of using Terraform infrastructure as code? Like what's your kind of your take? Like how does a customer or someone should start there?
So from what we have seen or what I have discussed also with customers, at some point in time, the pain of manually maintaining stuff is that high that they just ask, how can we automate that? I think that's one way to do things, because then you really have the pressure. Then you have to learn how to do Terraform, then you have to do the setup and so on and so forth. I think it would make sense to do that right from the start. And I'm quite aware, as we already discussed, that BTP admins are kind of a special snowflake, because they are usually not coming from the cloud. They are coming from NetWeaver administration, maybe from database administration. Of course, you also had automation there, and I also saw a lot of customers who did a lot of Ansible stuff and whatnot to set things up. But of course, it's again one step more to do Terraform. But I would really recommend everybody who is now starting their journey on BTP to, as an admin, take a look at Terraform. I mean, we have an not open SAP course. It's no longer called like that. It's a free course on Terraform targeting BTP admins. So you don't have to know anything about Terraform, but you have to know some basics around BTP, and then you can do that course. I think that's something that you should do from the start. Now, having said that, it's never too late to start with Terraform. So if you have now started with BTP, you have done all the ClickUps in the cockpit, and you have 30 subaccounts, you can say, okay, from now on, we want to automate things. New subaccount 31, will then be done by Terraform. The rest is still managed manually. And 32, 33, and so on and so forth. And at some point in time, you then say, okay, we are now quite knowledgeable about Terraform. We are quite confident to know how things are going. And then Terraform gives you the option to also import existing subaccounts into Terraform. So it's kind of, you would first cover the greenfield part, which is always easier. And then you say, okay, we have those existing subaccounts. We want to bring them under the management of Terraform. Then you can do that. That's possible by Terraform. We even have a dedicated tool to make your life easier there, because it's not a trivial task, but it's doable to get this stuff going. Of course, again, there is always another aspect. So if you have those subaccounts, you should first check, do you still need them? So that's kind of the perfect approach, to first check what is really still needed in the subaccounts. Are the subaccounts per se still needed, or do we do some consolidation there? And then if you say, okay, that's now the kind of set of subaccounts that I want to bring under the management of Terraform, then you can import that. We saw that at several customers who went down that path. So they first consolidated stuff. So I think one customer went down from 50 subaccounts to 30.
Okay.
And then he imported them into Terraform. So that's also doable, but that's a bit of an advanced topic if you're completely new to Terraform.
So I heard no matter which kind of a phase of your journey you are for the BTP, even if you are already existing BTP customer, you have maybe 10, 15 sub-accounts already.
Yeah,
You can
certainly.
always say use Terraform for the next few new things, and you still kind of keep your operations running as a, so it's not like you have to do like a, you can still do like a both, right? That's what I heard. Like, is it correct?
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
don't, first of all, don't do a big bang. That's
Big, okay.
rarely
Yeah.
working.
We don't like Big Bang security. We don't never like Big Bang. Okay, so I'm with you on that for sure.
That's kind of completely not a good approach. And don't be religious about things, because that's something that is then kind of, I don't know if it's a German thing, but that's kind of the second notion. And then we have to do everything with Terraform, and we have to do it perfect from the start. No, you don't have to do it perfect from the start. Even if you do a brownfield approach, then start with importing subaccounts, start with importing entitlements. That's already cool. That's already a good first approach. Maybe not first with the service instances, and then move iteratively forward. Nobody's preventing you from that, especially not Terraform. You can do that really resource by resource, so to say. And that's something that especially admins, I think, have to get used to, because it's more on the, I would say, developer side of the house, where you have this agile approach, where you do a lot of iterations, where you refine stuff and move forward that way. And for admins, that's a bit of a new experience. At least that's my perception.
No, I think you're right. As you rightly said, like admins are, at least the one I have seen it, is coming from that whole SAP NetWeaver, SAP basis background, even like somebody like me, versus somebody who have been the cloud guy, who have been doing this Terraform for the other cloud resources. It's so easy for them to adapt this Terraform for BTP versus getting a SAP guy to learn. And people always pick the easy one. Easy route is cockpit. I simply just go and create, right? Why I have to, unless there's a real pain, like you have so much of work and it's not even sustainable. You can't even do it anymore because you don't have enough resources and management of, and then maybe people messing changes and they're forgetting about it. And it's just, you don't know what's going on in my, there's a different logging, but it's still, I would say there's no like one kind of review of, at least that's like my wish list. I want to control as a security person. We have labels and it's all enforced. It's not a manual thing you have to do it, to remember to do it, right? And then checking it back, right? How do we ensure it's being done, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So fully agree with that. That's how it should be. And as I said, you can move forward with that. And yeah, they are coming from the NetWeaver world, and you always go down the path of let's say least resistance. And it's fully understandable because development teams are coming there, management is coming there now. With AI, there is even more pressure to move faster and do this and do that. And as you said, the admin team will not grow. So it will stay in. We have seen teams of 3 to 5 people who are responsible for 70 or 100 sub-accounts. And that's not sustainable, as you said. So you have to find a way out of that. From my perspective, Terraform is a very good approach to do that.
Yeah, I'm all in for automation. And even for the AI, I'm like, we have to embrace the AI because so much to do. You can't do it alone. So you need team of even automation, team of things like Terraform, right? Where you put a guardrails, you define your policies, and you know what is being done and created, right? And there's like sure, we know what is being done versus leaving it to human error, right? And then if you got the good team, they will do things in a right way. If you just got like I don't know, they just do things just to take the least resistance path or take the easy one and then just go live with the whatever thing we're going live with, right?
Exactly.
So let me again switch back to my kind of my security hat again and trying to be more selfish here. So a lot of user and the BTP user administration, I would say, I think there's a way to maybe automate using CIS or whatever we call it, the identity services, SAP Cloud Identity Services. But if you don't kind of have that whole process, maybe using IEG and things like that, you still have to create like users manually if you don't have the shadow user enabled and things like that. So, and even you said the deleting, cleaning of the users, adding role collections, if you're doing it to them manually. So I heard I can use both CLI, which I have used it. So I kind of found very useful.
Yeah.
And then I can use Terraform. I tried to do Terraform route, but again, I took the least risk and the CLI was easy. I just have to give users and role collections and things like that.
And
And it did my job. But so if I have a Terraform for my admin, so can I have like multiple Terraforms, like one for security, one for, like, is it based on different tasks or is it one file for everything?
no. You can and you should split it. So there is
Okay.
one thing with Terraform that's called the state. So
Okay.
Terraform has kind of a memory. So it memorizes what it did, which will help you as a security guy to find out if somebody changed the configuration. Because
Okay.
Terraform has the code part that we already mentioned, then it has the state thing, and then we have BTP, how it looks like. Now, if you do a Terraform refresh or Terraform plan, Terraform will take its memory, will take the code, and will take what is on the platform, and it will compare that. Now, let's say somebody removed a label or changed a role collection setup, assigning additional roles to that one. Terraform will tell you that. And you should, because of the state file, kind of cut things a bit into pieces. So let's say we set up a sub account and we set up the entitlements, and then we do the environment setup. This is something that probably rarely changes. Maybe there will be some new entitlements at some point in time, but that's something that rarely changes.
Yeah.
So
I
I
agree.
would put that into one configuration, which then has one state file that you don't have to change if you want to create new role collections, because that's maybe something that happens more frequently. So I would split that apart. And I would also split apart service instance creation and app subscriptions, because that's probably something that changes more frequently, and also space creation is something that might be more frequently. And this you can split however you want to do it. I personally would split it according to the frequency of change. So how often are changes expected? And of course, who is responsible for what, so that you can, as we talked before about this technical user for the Terraform application, to split this or to have multiple users with very, as far as BTP allows, well-defined role collections assigned to those users. And this is something that I would recommend. Reason for that is I discussed this code state platform.
Yeah.
When you do this planning or refreshing, Terraform has to read in the state and has to compare everything. Now, if you combine, let's say, sub-account, entitlements, environment instance, plus roles, plus services, plus subscriptions in one state file, And the only thing that you always change are service instances. Terraform has to check everything from top to bottom. It will say, yeah, nothing changed, cool, but it has to do it. And there, at the end of the day, technically, that means a lot of API calls, a lot of processing. It simply takes longer. And I would avoid that. Now, when it comes to roles and users, I mean, there is one thing that you can do on BTP. And as you already mentioned, there is the sub-cloud identity services. And there we also have we have a provider in beta state for sub-cloud identity services to also automate that part of the journey.
Thank you. I was gonna come to that, okay, because I struggle on that whole. It's not as easy as it should be.
We also struggle, so that's why it's still in beta. So when we ship a provider in GA, we do our best to have it as stable as possible. And with the sub-cloud identity services, we have this now in beta for a quite long time, at least from our perception, but it's still not in a shape that we have, well, a good feeling handing it out in GA. Reason is not because we are too stupid to implement the Go code for the Terraform provider. Reason is that the APIs are not in a shape or form yet that fit to the Terraform mindset, if you want to phrase it like that. This is improving, and I'm, let's say, semi-optimistic that this year we will get this provider GA, which will be a huge puzzle piece in the automation journey overall.
So I feel like I have to do a second kind of a episode as well. Seems like a topic. I'm loving it. Just I'm hearing more about it. So is there like a place where, so as a customer, do I have to like write all these files on my own, or is there like template which SAP or Terraform provides, which I can simply use it and then modify based on my naming convention for sub accounts, things like that? Is it like how easy is to kind of start adopting it versus just you just have to do everything on your own?
So every Terraform provider is open source. So all the providers are documented in the HashiCorp Terraform registry. So each resource, subaccount, directory, entitlement, etc., is documented there with an example code snippet. So you can take that one. To be precise, it's also on the OpenTofu registry. So we support Terraform from HashiCorp as well as OpenTofu. OpenTofu, for those who don't know it, was forked from HashiCorp due to some license changes. Nothing an end user has to worry about, but we support both and everything is documented there from a resource perspective. Now, what your question is going to is, well, even if I know how the resource would look like or should look like, I of course have still to know a lot about the BTP, how things are wired together. And this is something where we will be working on this year to make your life easier with respect to that. So to kind of have, as you mentioned, some predefined building blocks that we as SAP curate for you and you can then use so that you don't have to go from scratch. Now, this is a bit of I wouldn't call it chicken egg problem, but it's a bit difficult to get the right block size, so to say, for those building blocks. Because every customer is a bit different, wants to see things a bit different. So we really have to work together with you folks to get the right cut of those so-called Terraform modules. Now, Terraform modules are an official delivery that you can do for Terraform, which is then also reflected in the HashiCorp registry as well as in the OpenTofu registry, and has even more examples. So with that, this would make your journey easier. Currently, it's really, like you said, you really have to kind of craft your configuration from scratch based on the examples that we give you, but you still have to know, how is this working together with that? What do I have to do there? Super trivial example, if you want to create service instances. You have to have an entitlement. You have to create the service instance. You have maybe to create new role collections because the service instance creation creates new roles that you want to collect into a role collection, and you have to assign that role collection to users or to a group. And this would be a perfect example how to bring this together in one building block where you say, I don't care how those things are wired together. I just want to have, at the end of the day, a service instance with those users assigned the right roles to get access to that one. And this is something that we are working on this year to get there some examples or Terraform modules, as it's called, through the door and deliver them to you. as I said, we are living on GitHub, so everything is on GitHub. So I would be really happy to get feedback what is used, how it's used. So we have probably one example that we will ship soon, a very small example about role collections, because it's doable, but it's not comfortable. So it's more like a comfortability gain if we publish this module. But of course, we also want to cover bigger building blocks to get forward there.
Okay.
But this is something that we will bring this year.
Okay. Maybe
And
just maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
One more thing before I forget it. You might be aware of the SAP BTP Administrators Guide on help.sap.com, which kind of has on a, I would say, high level, a description how you best structure your sub-accounts and how you do things. And for this document or description on help.sap.com, we already have Terraform samples. So we have a dedicated Terraform repository that reflects the setup that is described on help.sap.com in Terraform.
Yeah, I just did the certification for the BTP admin, and I saw Terraform that was there, but for some reason it was not kind of testing on those things. We're just testing on the cockpit level. Maybe we do it reverse way. If you do it all Terraform, and that's where we'll make it like this is where you start. Right? Unless you make it easy and enforce it, right? Humans, we take that as the easy and least resistance path, as you said.
Absolutely.
So before I kind of let you go, Christian, I think we have to do a second follow-up episode if you're open to it. I have some questions. I don't want to take more time today for you. If you're open, we can continue for the next few more minutes. First, security. Can I still do Terraform just for security use case? Everything I do, because I'm trying to look into more automations and things like that. So it feels like different teams there. Can we still say, let's maybe tackle any new service key creation? Any kind of things like that has to go on that Terraform form. Maybe
this is something
can
that
I
we
do
see,
that across all sub accounts? Can I do that?
You can do that, yeah. So you have to already do some smart structuring there. So let's say we already covered the user topic. This is something that you can carve out. You have the security settings on sub-account level with I don't know, iframe URLs and whatnot. This is something that you can carve out into Terraform, and of course also the service key creation. Now, what I saw at one customer was not a good approach there, because what they did is they kind of tried to do all those service key handling via one configuration for all sub-accounts. That's something that I would not do, because the sub-accounts probably represent different projects. And I would split that, although that looks a bit like over-engineered, because you just have then 3 service keys in one Terraform configuration for a sub-account, and then you have that 20 times. But you probably will not stop there. You will go up the chain. You will then also do service instances. You will also do some other stuff. And if you have already structured that clearly, it's easier to go. But as we said now several times, humans tend to do the easy way. And that was the easiest way that they could do. And now they have to drag it apart because it doesn't work out on a larger scale. But as I said, so for service keys, this is something that you can and should do. I think what might also be connected then are destinations that are using the service keys. So that's also something that you might think about to bring together. And can I even automate my service key like a lifecycle? I know there's, again, this NHI seems like it's all new again. Threat, I know this is new in the threat vector, and it's not properly done. Just create service key and forget about it, right? So can I just use one Terraform? Maybe it's taking care of everything, or is it not possible? It's doable, but it's a workaround, because when you think about Terraform, it's declarative. So there is no. So what you want to do if you change a key is something that is imperative, or you want to have a trigger. So what you can do, and that's also where we have a code sample for, is to introduce an artificial drift. So you take a resource that represents basically a clock, and you say after, I don't know, 3 months, 4 weeks, you get a drift, and this resource gets recreated, and due to the recreation, it recreates also the service key. But as I said, that's not so cool from my perspective, because it's this artificial drift is something that I don't like, but it's doable if you want to do it. So from a security perspective, I think that's an okay solution, and probably the best solution that you currently get on SAP BTP. So again, thank you for coming. I think before I let you go, I want to maybe
give a couple of key takeaways to our audience if they're listening in. If they have questions, I think they heard about it, what they heard today, and if they're BTP admins and if they're admins coming from SAP world and trying to be BTP admin and they're responsible for doing things we discussed, even security admins as well, where they can start to know more about this? Is it like
Mhm.
a things which you can share? We'll put it on our podcast. They're like I would assume there's a
I
GitHub repository and things like that which you can share, right? We can share that.
I will share that. So
Okay.
what's important to know is we are completely open source.
Okay.
There is no hidden agenda, so to say. Everything that we do is documented on GitHub. And if it's not documented on GitHub, we probably don't do it. Due to the fact that we are open source, we have a dedicated landing page, which is not on help.sap.com because we are not a product which is commercialized, which gives you a perfect entry point to check what resources are where. And if you want to learn Terraform, as I said before, there is this learning course on sap.com. I will share the link, dedicated link for that one, because I think that's a perfect starting point for your journey with Terraform. But as I said, I will share the landing page that you can put in the show notes and the different GitHub repositories as well as this course. And I think then you are quite good to go. And if you want to interact with us, I mean, it's the GitHub mechanism. So if you find an error, you can, or if you have a feature request, you can open an issue. And we also created or activated GitHub discussions. So you can discuss with us on the GitHub repository if you have questions, if you're unsure about something. You don't need to open an issue because that's always where we really get busy. If you have questions, if you want to learn something, if you have questions about how to do something or doubts there, discussions are the perfect place to go.
And one more question, I think. So who should be kind of a like whom we are selling this? Like if we again, it's everything about selling. You have to convince and somebody have to buy this thing, right? That the pain is too much and they're
Mhm.
struggling to manage it, right? So is it like a somebody in SAP side, I would say, on a customer side, who are kind of responsible for orchestrating or building all
Yeah.
the infra
So
or platform,
yeah.
right? The
So
problem should be big enough, like they are not looking for solutions, right? So the BTP admins.
it's the BTP admins. It depends on the organization to whom they have to sell it with respect to who are they reporting to. Usually, as a CIO, I would expect that they are not aware of the details of Terraform, but they are aware that they have to automate it. I think now the pressure is getting more and more because, as you said, work on the shoulders of the admin teams is not getting less, especially with the advent of AI. With you security folks, it's even, I think, more severe because completely new attack vectors are opening up and things you have to care about. And everything that is freeing up your time to work on the new topics that you can automate would be beneficial. So it's from my perspective, it's a no-brainer, but I'm not in management. I know that it's always a bit of a bigger story to convince them, but I think that story should be sufficient to have them more time for the more important topics that they have to do.
Yeah, I feel like even security and maybe even for compliance, right? Like if you
Yeah.
can, because if it's helping me to stay compliant and we have auditable, traceable, we know what our configurations should be and the thrift and things like this. I kind of that was music to my ears versus it just says a kind of a C where you just have to go in every and there's a different audit mechanism, but it's still like you have to go in every sub account, Cloud
Yep.
Foundry
Yep.
space, and you don't know what's going on if you have like 100 or maybe more sub accounts and services. So I think maybe the compliance can be one more like if we can sell to the compliance and security folks, maybe they can kind of influence your admin or the management to embrace this versus relying on a manual and human cockpit actions.
And FinOps. So that's also
Yeah.
part of the game. So you have every party that has an interest on getting things in a, let's say, standardized way and get information in a standardized way. They should all be voting for Terraform in an organization. I think that's then enough, let's say, not pressure, but enough motivation to do things that way. Yeah.
And if you're BTP admin, if you're not, maybe you don't have the skill set, maybe talk to your cloud administrator. Maybe they're already using Terraform and things like that in some way, right? And maybe create the team, right? Learn.
Super
Yeah.
important topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So within every company that we talk to, there is an AWS or an Azure or an GCP
Yeah.
admin team who have set up everything for Terraform perfectly, who
Yeah.
know how to do it, but the SAP silo is not talking to them.
black box for
I
them.
don't
Yes.
know why, but they are not talking with each other. Yeah, if they would, hey, that would be super easy to introduce Terraform because they can build on the experiences that the other teams already had.
Yeah. I think clearly because you understand the SAP word, but they understand that word, right? If you bring in both the word together, and that's what, like, I don't know, I do like this cybersecurity for SAP. I try to bring in like cyber and the traditional SAP security, which we have been just doing GRC and user, and that's it, right? And then we have to go beyond that, right? So it's always you have to build a team. No one team can do everything on their own. So they already have championed that whole Terraform, the GitHub, and they live in that world, right? Now we just all we have to do is create the team, and I think
bring them together. The knowledge is there, and the entry barrier is then super low. But you have to bring them together.
Yeah.
Good that you mentioned that. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. Thank you, Christian, for coming on the show. Any last thing you want to share before I let you go, and maybe promise for coming on the second episode? I think we need to do a second follow-up one as well, Christian.
Or for IS, yeah. Once again, thanks for having me, and for all the folks who are listening to this podcast. Yeah, start your Terraform journey. Give us your feedback. So we are really relying on that, and we love to do things. As a kind of marketing, we also have a roundtable that is taking place all 4 or 5 weeks, where we present what's new on the SAP BTP CLI side and the Terraform side. Do some demos, and it should be, or at least that's my plan, to have there a community of folks who are working with Terraform, who can exchange in this area within this hour, ask questions to us, exchange it with other customers that are in the call to get some more knowledge. How are things going there? What's working? What's not working? What is the experience? So this is something that I can highly recommend. And if you want to be informed about that, follow me on LinkedIn. That's unfortunately the only way how to do it, to get everything done with respect to data privacy. So I will share always 3 weeks ahead the invitation, and then you have to sign up to the roundtable, attend it, and have fun.
So we can share your LinkedIn profile on your podcast as well, right? If they have questions, they want to reach out and know more about it, what's going on with the roundtable.
Of course. Yeah,
and give feedback too. Okay. Thank you, Christian. I think maybe also like the security, and maybe we can join as well. I feel like security has a lot of at least in my mind, I have a lot of use cases. I would love to use Terraform because it's just so much to do, and it's great power comes with great responsibility, and it's just you can't do it enough, right? You don't have all the resources you want to have, and you need to automate. You need to have the IAC or infrastructure as code, and which is being used in industry like this is the standard, right? It's just how do we bring that into our SAP ecosystem?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Christian, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
I hope I will have you back for the follow-up one, or maybe more with the updates and things. The great work you are doing for our community and everything you're doing there. So I appreciate coming on the show and sharing, Christian.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for having me.